these are good questions, and they're questions that I've asked myself over the years through my thinking processes. Why would I need, within this model that I'm presenting, why do I need for there to be a consciousness before the creation of this physical universe? Why can't I just think in terms of consciousness having been created in the physical universe? I'm open-minded on this either way, because I think I'm approaching this, as I said in the first video on this series of exabots seeding the universe, that I'm trying to build a model that takes everything into consideration, and this includes belief, which has evolved with consciousness here on this planet. And part of the belief has to do with this universe being created by something, consciousness, which over the evolution of humanity has sort of come to represent in that one word called God, G-O-D, which for some is not the nicest of words due to the history of what human beings have done under the influence of this thing called God. So in that regard, it's easier, if you're that type of person, to think about the universe in regards to consciousness, as consciousness and the universe are not from another source of consciousness. It's not from a creator God. It's also why I said, again in that first video, that there's no point in thinking or trying to understand what that source which interacted with the stuff of this universe, which was inert in a sense. It was there, but it was no form. It was formless. That interaction that happened caused form to begin, and what we call physical matter, and even waves and everything that comes from that initial interaction, that initial happening, which in turn made the matter happen through that interaction, through that action. A ripple effect. So I can quite easily go along with the robot model and the philosophy, if you like, that suggests that human beings are evolving through a concerted conscious effort on the part of consciousness to go out and explore the physical universe. At the moment, consciousness within human form is basically imprisoned on this planet. We can't go very far out there, but what we can and do is create machinery. We always have. Human beings are always creating tools. It's just the way human beings are evolving, and consciousness is using the form to create the tools. So we don't need prior consciousness or spiritual or other dimensions of consciousness being the reason for consciousness being here. It may well have evolved, but the point is what it is doing, and consciousness in this evolution and in this physical universe is creating tools in which to explore and discover. And war, there's other aspects to tool making which are not altogether healthy for the bigger picture of human destiny. Like we all know, or a lot of us know or understand the concept that if we don't change our thinking and adapt to the natural elements a bit more logically, and we continue to fight in war and make profit from each other, we're not likely to get to that point as a species where we're going to be creating robotic instruments in which to explore. What is doing the exploring is consciousness. So in terms of why I have decided to include a pre-consciousness is because it's a bit like thinking that we here on Earth are the only life-bearing planet in the universe and there is nothing else besides us. We are it. That's it. We all know, mathematically speaking, in the numbers and the evidence that's presented, that it is highly unlikely that is so. In fact, it's practically impossible that we are the only biological life forms in the whole universe. So in that light, I can also take that reasoning and say consciousness is not necessary only in this universe. And because this universe obviously came about through some kind of interaction, science is still not sure, but we can at least imagine different scenarios, and there are different scenarios in the scientific community to try and sort of make a model of what might have happened to cause that Big Bang, to cause that initial happening. And some theories go that there are lots of potential universes and universes in fields which come together occasionally, interact, and that's what creates. There are other belief systems, or not so much belief systems as they are theories, which say that these inert fields are floating amongst each other, and occasionally they touch and combine, and that creates, as I've said. But there are others that say that there's alternate universes which are slightly different from our own, and they keep going in a line. There are all sorts of theories, as the internet obviously shows us. This is one of them. So I take into account beliefs because I myself was brought up with beliefs, and not all of them healthy, some of them very dysfunctional in fact, but nonetheless I understand beliefs, having gone through them. And one of the things about beliefs that I learned was to test beliefs, test them. Don't just believe them, ask yourself, why do I believe this? And if you find holes in that and discovering and examining your belief systems and find holes in those systems, you know, that can't be filled without a drop of fantasy, then let them go. Is the concept of consciousness being in other universes, which, as I explained, something's happened to create this, something interacting has created this universe. That's a fact. What it was, we don't know, so we can't start putting labels on it. And if we're going to say God, then we start painting pictures of what God is. We're putting labels on it. It's incomprehensible in the sense, because we are on the inside and we cannot look out very easily. Now, some would argue you can. Others would argue that it's some of these experiences that people have and share and say whether they're astral or there are numbers of them that science has proven this is not, it's all in the mind, it's all in your brain. To be more specific, it's not just the mind but the brain, the grey matter in there. It's the brain that's doing these things like astral travelling, experiencing out of body, where you feel consciousness is out of body. And so to some people who have experienced these things, it is evidence in a subjective manner that consciousness can indeed exist outside of the form of the brain that holds the form. Science is saying no, it's just a trick, of it's an illusion. And when I say science, I'm using that loosely. It's skeptics who use science as saying that science has explained. Well, science hasn't explained really. Science is just pointing out that this is in a sense likely, and in some cases most likely, that that's where it can be sourced. The experience is sourced within the mind. The person just thinks that they've left the body, because consciousness is derived from the brain. However, plants and science have also been discovered within the use of science that plants display signs of consciousness, and plants do not have brains. And then some would jump on and say the whole planet's in a consciousness, which is possible, but we need to build some bridges between that point and that point before we say for sure. Or you can say for sure and enjoy the experience of intermingling and communing with Gaia. That's completely your buzz. Right? But from the science point of view, let's build bridges, let's see, let's find the evidence. For me, I've had experiences, astrally speaking, where consciousness indeed is outside the form. So to make a finer point as to what we're talking about here in regards to consciousness, it is the thing that can say I am. And so I can say I am within the form, this form, but I can also say I am when I'm outside of the form in an astral type experience, as these experiences are labelled normally, astral. So there's a floating free and yet still feeling like you're in form, but I don't want to sort of veer off the subject too much on that. To get to the point is that if there is this dimension intermingling, what is it about consciousness that we can try to understand about it? Because we're trying to understand, in a sense, ourselves, the I am. And so this is why I've got to the point in my own travels as to understanding that indeed this whole earth experience that we're all sharing, as we call our reality, is a bundle of interconnected consciousness in form, which we call the earth or the planet. That's where people get the Gaia thing from, or Gaia. I don't really know how it's pronounced. I've never heard someone sound the word, but I say Gaia. So, and that's all lovely. So we say, this consciousness, what's it doing? And that's where I'm getting back to the exobots and being the focus on robots making machines. That's what consciousness is doing on this planet. Above all, it's doing a lot of other things in its separate ways, but in its one focus way, that's what it's doing. And we can look at history and see the pattern. We can see evolution. We can look at the past evolution of the bones we're digging up to discover that consciousness was working through a dinosaur animal. That was the predominant animal, the lizard, way before it was working through mammal and what we have now, because something apparently from outer space whacked into this conscious nest of life and caused that form to largely become extinct. Most of the great huge things definitely became extinct, but this consciousness just continued this evolutionary process and created more, and we don't know for sure that that asteroid or what it was that hit the nest didn't bring these seeds with it in order to help that DNA creativity. The material is there and the consciousness uses it. Now, in that way, I am saying too that evolution is displaying intelligence, and that is coming through consciousness. Again, we can get back to the saying about, silliness, if you like, of thinking that we are the only life-bearing planet in the universe, in the same sense that we can't say as human beings or as mammals that, or as have forms of brain, that we are the only creatures that can have consciousness, or the only creatures on this planet. Like trees can't, and rocks can't, and water can't. You see what I'm saying? We don't know enough about consciousness. We don't know enough to make any particular claim one way or the other. But what we do know, and this is getting back to the exobots, is that this consciousness is creating all the time, co-creating, just continues to create. And in my assumption that there are other life forms doing exactly similar processes through this consciousness, create, and that's why eventually consciousness is working on a way of creating machines in which it can inhabit, so that it can go out there and explore more. So I hope that answers the question in a wee way.